a lesson on gender, gender identity, and sexuality. Let's begin with some basic definitions. Sexual orientation and affectional orientation are two somewhat related, but different things. Sexual orientation describes the pattern of a person's sexual attractions based on gender. Affectional orientation describes the pattern of a person's romantic attraction, or the gender of the people the person falls in love with or desires to partner with. There are three basic types of sexual orientations: monosexual, polysexual, and asexual. Monosexual sexual orientations, exclusively attracted to one gender, gay, generally refers to a man who is attracted to men. Sometimes refers to all people who are attracted to people of the same sex. Sometimes, homosexual is used for this also, although this label is seen by many today as a medical term that should be retired from common use. Lesbian, a woman who is attracted to a woman. Straight, a man/woman who is attracted to the opposite sex. Alternately referred to as heterosexual. Polysexual sexual orientations, attracted to multiple genders. Bisexual, attracted to people of one's own gender and people of other gender or genders. Pansexual, attracted to people regardless of gender. Asexual sexual orientation. Some people do not experience sexual attraction. Most people this applies to identify as asexual. Asexual people are not sexually attracted to anyone and/or do not desire to act on attraction to anyone. This does not necessarily mean sexless. Asexual people sometimes do experience affectionate, romantic attraction. Questioning. In addition to the previously mentioned, some people don't like and don't use labels. Other people identify as questioning, a term used to describe someone who is unsure of or exploring their sexual orientation and/or gender identity. Gender. Gender is complex and multifaceted. In North American culture, several distinct facets of ourselves get lumped together when we talk about gender. Biological sex. Attributes such as anatomy, chromosomes, and hormones that are usually assigned at birth and inform whether a person is male, female, or intersex. Gender identity. A person's internal sense of being a man, woman, neither of these, both, and so on. One's inner sense of being. Everyone has a gender identity. Gender expression. The ways in which a person manifests masculinity, femininity, both, or neither through appearance, behavior, dress, speech patterns, preferences, and more. Cultural expectation. The cultural expectation is that one's biological sex, gender identity, and gender expression will align in stereotypical ways, that someone who is male will identify as a boy/man and have a masculine gender expression, for example. This expectation does not serve our diverse world and the myriad experiences of self that exist. Different gender identities. Some of the different gender identities include cisgender, bigender/gender fluid, non-binary/genderless, genderqueer, transsexual, and transgender. Cisgender. A description for a person whose gender identity, gender expression, and biological sex all align, for example man, masculine, and male. Bigender/gender fluid. A person who fluctuates between traditionally woman and man gender-based behavior and identities, identifying with both genders and sometimes a third gender. Non-binary/genderless. A person who does not identify with any gender. Genderqueer. A blanket term used to describe people whose gender falls outside of the gender binary. Transgender. A blanket term used to describe all people who are not cisgender. A term to describe anyone who does not identify as their biological sex. Transsexual. A person whose gender identity is the binary opposite of their biological sex, who may undergo medical treatment and change their biological sex, oftentimes to align it with their gender identity, or they may live their lives as the opposite sex. Not to be confused with transgender. Transgender typically applies to people who haven't undergone medical treatment. Gender expression. For some people, their gender expression may not match their biological sex. That is, while other people see them as being male or female, they may or may not fit their expectations of masculinity or femininity because of the way they look, act, or dress. People whose gender expression is not what we might expect represent many different backgrounds. Their age, sex, race, ethnicity, or sexual orientation has no bearing on their gender expression. Drag. Drag is clothing characteristically associated with one sex when worn by a person of the opposite sex. A drag king is a person who consciously performs masculinity, usually in a show or theatre setting, presenting an exaggerated form of masculine expression, oftentimes done by a woman. A drag queen, on the other hand, is a person who consciously performs femininity, presenting an exaggerated form of feminine expression, oftentimes done by a man. Cross-dressing. Wearing clothing that conflicts with the traditional gender expression of your sex and gender identity. For example, a man wearing a dress for any one of many reasons, including relaxation, fun, and sexual gratification. While drag is usually for theatrics and show, cross-dressing is mostly for the reasons listed above. Cross-dressers are often called transvestites. Important terms: intersex, a person with a set of sexual anatomy that doesn't fit within the labels of female or male. For example, 47, XX-Y phenotype, uterus, and penis. Androgyny, a gender expression that has elements of both masculinity and femininity. Occasionally used in place of intersex to describe a person with both female and male anatomy. Binary sex, a traditional and outdated view of sex, limiting possibilities to female or male. Closeted, a person who is keeping their sexuality or gender identity a secret from many or any people, and has yet to come out of the closet. Coming out, the process of revealing your sexuality or gender identity to individuals in your life. Often incorrectly thought to be a one-time event, this is a lifelong and sometimes daily process. Fluidity, generally with another term attached, like gender fluid or fluid sexuality. Fluidity describes an identity that is a fluctuating mix of the options available, for example, man and woman, gay and straight. FTM/MTF, a person who has undergone medical treatments to change their biological sex, female to male, or male to female, oftentimes to align it with their gender identity. Trans woman, a person who was assigned a male sex at birth, but identifies as a woman. Trans man, a person who was assigned a female sex at birth, but identifies as a man. The last two are not to be confused with FTM/MTF. Homophobia, fear, anger, intolerance, resentment, or discomfort with queer people, often focused inwardly as one begins to question their own sexuality. Outing someone, when someone reveals another person's sexuality or gender identity to an individual or group, often without the person's consent or approval. Not to be confused with coming out. Transitioning, a term used to describe the process of moving from one sex/gender to another. Sometimes this is done by hormone or surgical treatments. Links to these websites will be in the description of the video. Feel free to look at them for more information that I may have left out.